All right, so what I'd like to share here is something I'm about to post to the forum in response to a post there that involved rich text and translating rich text to another format that can be expressed in plain text and then being able to translate that back. So I wrote a couple of custom functions to do that. They are JavaScript based, so they do require a plugin that allows you to evaluate JavaScript. And I'll just give you a quick tour of the situation here. So you can see in this demo file, I've got some rich text in this field here. That field is named rich text source. So let's take a look at that in the data viewer. We of course don't see the rich formatting here, but you can see the data. And as I'm sure most everybody is well aware, there's a getAsCSS function that we can use to sort of get the information about what sort of colors and formatting and size and font information has been applied to that text. But it's kind of in an ugly format. So the first thing that I did was I wrote a custom function that'll express it as JSON. So instead of getAsCSS, let's use one of our custom functions here. It's called FMP rich text JSON encode. Let's get that. And we're going to specify an output format of JSON. I'm going to leave the last parameter empty for now. And you run that, and it expresses that rich text in JSON. So it's basically parsing that CSS data and expressing it in something that's a little bit more contemporary and that we're all more used to at this point, I think. So no big surprises here. If you were to take a close look at this, I'm sure it would all make sense. It's basically anything that it can get from that CSS file it's including here, unless you stipulate that you only want certain information. So for instance, if I just wanted size, I could put size there, and then we're just getting size, or I could put size and color, and we'd get that information. We could get rid of either of those, and I think style is another one we can use here. So you can control, you can limit, in other words, the amount of data that you're pulling out of that CSS in case you don't need all of it. So that's part one of this. You can, express the rich text that you saw here as JSON. And the advantage of that, or the use case for that, is when you need to pass this sort of rich text information and preserve all of the style and color and size and font information, but you need to pass it through something that doesn't support rich text, and that could be something like an HTTP call. Maybe you were doing the syncing through the data API, or I think in the original post that I saw in the forum, somebody was storing this as text in MySQL. So there are a few use cases. I can't think of a lot of them that I'm going to run into, but I can see how there would be a few where it's helpful to be able to turn this into something that's can be stored in a plain text format. The other format that you can output here, let's go ahead and return to using all the information. Besides JSON, you can use a format called FMP calc, and that will express all of this information. It'll express the rich text data as a FileMaker calculation that, when evaluated, will evaluate back to the rich text. So if we were to evaluate this, you'll see, uh-oh, what did I do? Oh, I spelled it wrong, evaluate. You'll see that we could get our original text back. And you don't see the rich text formatting here, of course, because we're in the data viewer, but you would see it if you had that in a regular field that was displaying, a normal FileMaker field. So that's how you can encode. And let's see, what else do I need to show you about this? There's not too much more. There's a companion function. Say you'd express this as JSON. We're back here. All right, there's a companion function that decodes, and it's named almost the same thing. It's like this. But instead of encode, it's decode. And that also takes a parameter, parameter that specifies the output type. So in this case, let's say rich text And again, we get our text back, and again, we're not seeing the rich text here. Alternatively, if you wanted to express it as a FileMaker calculation, the JSON again, remember that's what we're acting upon here. You could do that and you'd get that same calculation that you'd see. So let's take a look at this in where you can actually see it looking good. Here's just some random text I did with various colors and whatnot. Expressed as JSON, translated back. Expressed as a FileMaker calculation, translated back. Let's see another example. Here's something where I just sort of scraped some data off of the forum. Again, expressed as JSON, translated back, expressed as a FileMaker calculation, and translated back. And that's it. I have a couple of longer examples in here, but it's basically the same thing. You can see that the information comes back to you looking like what it was when it started. So again, it's just a couple of custom functions that do this. Let's see here. We've got FMP rich text JSON encode. That's the one that takes the rich text and turns it into something that can be stored or transmitted as plain text. And then the companion function decode takes that JSON and either turns it into a FileMaker calculation or back into rich text. There are a few details for how you use these when the volume of rich text is so great that you can't pass it all at one time into an evaluate function because it'll be too much. But there's a way that it chunks the information for you so that you can loop through it. You would need a script for that. The last thing to mention about this file, and I will post the file and include details probably in the YouTube comments for where you can get at this. But the last custom function I've got here, I wrote to help me with these sorts of things and distribute them to people who use different plugins. I tend to use VBox to do the JavaScript, but I know Base Elements also does JavaScript, and so does Monkey Bread. So basically this is a custom function that looks to see which of those you might have installed and enabled, and then allows you to wrap all your JavaScript calls through this custom function, and it'll route them to the plugin that you've got. So it makes it a little bit easier for me to distribute a file like this and hope that it'll work for you without specifying that you have to change the plugin that might be your plugin of choice. So I think that's pretty much it. I really appreciate you watching, and I'll post this up on the forum. Bye-bye.